This conference will now be recorded.
Aaron, when I get started here in a minute, do I need to reread the notice thing before we start the regular session?
Yes, it's better to,
All right.
since this is what'll be recorded for the public, publicly available video.
All right. And Mr. Collins is back. Hello, Rob. Yeah, 6:29. We'll get started here in just a minute.
And Mayor Pro Tem, when you get into the meeting, I've only received the one citizen participation registration form that I mentioned earlier, and that's from Mr. Ron Smith, who is on the meeting, and it is for item number 9.
Yes.
If I get any other emails during the time, I'll just let you know.
All right. All right. It's 6:30.
Guys, I have an interesting message. Listening to this,
Do what, Frank?
well, I got the message I've got it is Office 365, and it says it wants me to verify me, I guess, and it said it sent me a code on my cell phone.
Yeah,
I could use somehow Office 365 issue may be screwing up the computer.
are you using one of your personal computers at home?
No, I'm on the laptop. Well, yeah, I do have my personal computer on. I got,
That's what I've
Something
got.
should pop up on your screen for you to enter that code.
well, it said it's to my cell phone, and I could leave the meeting, turn off you guys here, and then see if I get the code, and then come back.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to impact the microphone. That's my concern. I would definitely, let's bring it in next week when you come by, and let's test it out and figure out the microphone when you're here.
If you're on your personal phone, there
Well,
is an access code to use. Are you on your personal phone?
Yeah,
Okay, there's an access code you need to use. It's 363 557 773.
Hey, Josh, Frank,
well, that's what I'm going to put on my
every code is different for each person when it sends it. It's a one-time code, and that's it. So,
It's on.
Frank, you should be able to minimize that screen and bring up the screen with the code on it to input it.
It's on the second page of tonight's agenda, City Council regular meeting.
I thought he's talking about the code for the Office 365.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a code. If you call in on your own phone, there's a code on the agenda for you, each of us.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, well, Frank, you can hear us and we can hear you. So start with you. I'm going to go
Works.
ahead.
You can hear me on the phone.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, well, we'll convene the meeting at 6:33. Notice is hereby given that the Lago Vista City Council will meet on Thursday, May 21st, 2020, beginning at 6:30 p.m. With the regular council meeting as prescribed by VTCA Government Code Section 551.041 to consider the following agenda items. Items do not have to be taken in the same order as shown in the meeting notice. And at this point, we have 6 of our members present: Mr. Devila, Mr. Collins, Mr. Williams, Frank Robbins, Mr. Barthlow, and myself. We have Sandra, our secretary, Roy, Aaron, and Star, and Dave Street. We will reconvene from executive session into open session to act as deemed appropriate in city council discretion regarding A, consultation with legal counsel and possible action concerning any regular meeting agenda item requiring confidential attorney-client advice necessitated by the deliberation and discussion of said item. Do I have any action from someone on the council?
No action.
This would be the spot where we'd make a motion to allow the payment of the claim for damages at the airport.
I make a motion that we approve the requested insurance claim for $1,564.39.
I will second.
We have a first and a second. We'll have to just go down the row. Mr. Barthlow? Aye. I can see your mouth move.
No, you gotta unmute. You gotta unmute yourself.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah. Aye.
Mr. Devila?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins?
The item, I think, and I'm still having trouble, guys. This item is not on our council agenda.
It was
No,
in the.
it was an item brought up in executive session.
I understand, but I think the item, it's a legal question. I don't think we can take action on an item that is not listed on our regular agenda.
It didn't get added to the amended agenda. If it's not on there, we can't take action. It has to be on the agenda. Either the executive agenda or the regular agenda.
I don't believe it was on either, was it?
No,
Mr. Ray?
No, sir. That's why we asked the question in executive of legal. Can we take action at this point?
My bad. I'm sorry. No, we can't take action on it. It has to be listed on the agenda in either the exec or the regular session to take formal action. The only thing that the council could have done would be give direction to the city manager, but based on the language in our charter, the council is the only one who can settle claims, and so based on that, I feel like this item would require official action by council. So we'll need to get it on there before you.
So we need to bring it back with the next meeting?
Mayor, we'll
Yes, sir.
add that on the next agenda.
Okay.
All right. Well, then we will negate that. Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Appreciate that. All right, we can go to citizens' comments. In accordance with the Open Meeting Act, council is prohibited from acting or discussing, other than factual responses to specific questions, any item not on the agenda. And I think Mr. Smith is the only individual that's on here that is not part of the council or staff. So I think we can move on. Items of community interest pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.0415. City Council may report on any of the following items: expressions of thanks, gratitude, or condolences, okay. Information regarding holiday schedules, recognition of individuals, proclamations, reminders regarding city council events, reminders regarding community events, health and safety announcements. I have a few of these. First announcement, the governor is opening up the state and allowing citizens to get out more. But that does not mean that the coronavirus is gone or is not a continuing problem. Please continue to use safe techniques when you're out in public: a mask, sanitizers for your hands, good hand washing when in contact with anything that's not your own house. This next week, already starting this week and going into next week, we are going to be doing a whole bunch of street work. They are starting now on Boggy, and we'll be doing Boggy from one end to the other. Next week, there will also be work started on Outpost Trace, National Drive, MacArthur, American Drive, Barkay Ranch, Boone, Highland Lake, Old Cove, and Coyote Trail. We need citizens to be aware of this and to watch for our crews and people working on the streets. They will be working from 7 in the morning until 7 in the evening, Monday through Saturday. So they're going to be on the streets quite a bit. Please be aware and watch for them. Monday is Memorial Day. Unfortunately, this year we can't have all of the activities that we've had in the past, but there will be a 12 noon ceremony at the Veterans Park. Will include the playing of taps, remarks from the mayor, and placing of a wreath. This will be live streamed on Facebook, and we would recommend that people participate with their Facebook links rather than attending in person. But if you do want to be there, please remember to use social distancing. This year is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. And there are a large number of people that are memorialized at our Veterans Park. And it's a time that as public and as citizens, we need to take a minute and remember those that have given the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. On Monday at 3 o'clock, there is a national moment of remembrance. We ask that all Americans everywhere at 3 o'clock stop for 1 minute, just a minute out of your day, and give thought and remembrance to those that have died in our wars, in our conflicts, to keep our country free. Yeah, this is not a big deal, but it is a specific designated time to remember these individuals. Next thing up, high school graduation is going to, Josh, I didn't write down the day. What day is it?
It's tomorrow, the 22nd.
Tomorrow, the 22nd. Okay. Yeah, there it is, tomorrow, up in the corner. All right. But the high school graduation will be tomorrow. The individuals that are graduating will be there in cars, will be called up 3 at a time, observing the precautions of social distancing and mask. When they get their diploma, they'll be able to take their mask off and have their picture made and that kind of thing. This again will be on Facebook and on Lago Radio. Once the ceremonies are completed, there will be a parade of the individuals that have graduated through the town. The police department will be working on protecting everybody, directing traffic, and at intersections. If you see this parade going by tomorrow, be sure and wave and honk. It's not exactly what we'd like to have for our graduating seniors, but at least it's something. And then, Mr. Ray, would you like to talk about Peggy Gibson?
Yes, sir. And I put the map on the screen. It moved your screen around, but I shared my screen and just showed the map of that parade route, just so those that are watching, feel free to go onto the city website, to the ISD website, or to multiple Facebook pages to see this route. And you'll be able to see that it starts about 7:15, and then it'll cover this area of the city. So that's up there just for now. And like I said, check out those other areas to look at that map and get more information. Mayor, thanks for letting me just talk for a second. Peggy Gibson has been a volunteer in our library since the beginning of Lago Vista. She began volunteering around 2000 when they moved, when her and her husband, Stan, moved to Lago, and she's been doing the reading program with the children ever since. So you think about 20 solid years of a reading program, and Peggy has been that person. Finally, she decided, her and Stan together as a team, decided that it's time to officially retire from those volunteer services. So this week, as Peggy volunteered without a lot of fanfare, there was a drive-by appreciation parade that occurred in front of Peggy's house. So Jan and Chief got together with a lot of people that had concerns and wanted to recognize Peggy and show her the love, even though they couldn't host something at the library. And everybody, we drove by, they provided some gifts, they threw some signs out, and it was one of those amazing recognition moments where you can really just value somebody. And it didn't have to be up close and in person. It was just the fact of being there to say thank you was a valuable asset. For someone like Peggy, I can tell you what the impacts are. If anyone's seen me reading The Wonky Donkey, this is what you get now. You lose somebody like Peggy, and you get the dumb readers like myself who want to try and fill that void for a period of time. And it just shows you the high quality and caliber of person that volunteers every Wednesday to read to kids. So I just wanted to say, take the time here at the beginning of this meeting to say thank you to Peggy. Thank you to Stan, and thank you for the community that has taken the time to appreciate Peggy. I would encourage people to send her an email or to send her a message that just says thank you for 20 plus years of awesome service to our community. So thanks, Mayor.
All right, does anybody else have anything?
When did the pool open?
Mayor, we do not have a definite date for pool openings. We have seen that there are some pools across the state and across the country that are opening. We have been in contact with the Lago Vista POA, with Lakeside at Tessera, with the Hollows about multiple options. We are looking at trying to open our pool around Father's Day, which is in June. And but that's still a month away, and we're trying to figure out, working with the YMCA, who is our managing partner for our pool and for our lifeguards, of how the most effective way to open the pool back open and to be safe.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to action items. Item number 3, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding resolution number 20-1843, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, selecting an independent auditor and authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement for audit services, finding and determining that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
I think that was resolution 1845. I think we said 1843.
Mine says 1843.
Oh,
What's the proper number?
no, mine says 1845.
Sandra?
43, correct? Yep, 1843.
1843, okay. Was that the older agenda?
Well, I'm looking for the new one now.
Okay. The council has desired to look at the possibility of getting another auditor. We've had an excellent relationship with the auditor that we have used for the last 10 years, 9 years, something like that. But it was discussed and felt that it would be appropriate to possibly look at someone new. And this was put out for bids, and we had 5 bids, and those people were all interviewed by the staff, and the staff has a recommendation. Do you want to give us that, Mr. Ray?
Yes, sir. Thanks for setting that up. We were excited. You'll recall that the last 2 times we put it out to bid, both times we received 2 bids. Last year, the second bid was from a firm in Houston, and so that was a challenge. In reviewing these 5, we were excited not just on the qualifications and experience, but also on the price. The recommendation that staff has is Singleton Clark and Company, not just because they were the lowest bid, but because they also have experience regionally and because they are local and close to us. I know that Councilor Davila spent some time reviewing these as well, Mayor, and may have some other input just to add.
All right. Mr. Davila, do you have some comment?
Can't hear you, Arch.
Hmm.
I looked at the 5 different people that put the bids in, and the one that I wrote down about, maybe I put it in my phone. Can you hear me now? No?
Art, you may need to turn off your video just for a minute.
Okay.
We were getting what you said, but it's really broken up. Now give it a shot.
Okay. Is that any better?
That's
Yes.
much better.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
So what I was saying is that I looked at the 5 different people that submitted their proposals, and the comment that I would have about Singleton Clark and Company is one of the last things that they note is that they may have additional fees. That additional fees may be possible at the termination of that audit. So that was something that got my attention. I thought, well, they're coming in at a very low price, but there's also the possibility that they're going to have more costs involved in the $22,000 that they proposed. What I found most interesting was the highest one being Belt Harris Pachesic. Their bid was $27,995. However, the thing that I noticed that got my attention is that they have served 150 different governments. So I think that puts them in the lead in terms of their experience. I actually crossed off Mr. Neffendorf and not because, as you might recall from our very first meeting with TML when we went to the newly elected, we were told that it was not a very good idea to have an auditor work for the city more than 5 years. So I crossed Neffendorf off for that reason. Beasley, Mitchell and Company, they were the second most expensive, but I saw that they had a deficiency in their firm's quality control as one of the comments made about them. So I crossed them off as well. So really the only two that I had that I noted that were in the running as far as I was concerned was Rod L. Abbott, who has 20 years of experience, and he provided a schedule of costs for the next 5 years, I believe. I thought that was an interesting point. But going back to my original thought is that Belt Harris Pachesic LLP, because they have so many clients, and they are from the Houston area, but because they have so many governments that they serve, I thought that they're probably the most well prepared to serve our needs. Those are my comments.
Mayor, let me add on a couple comments to Councilor Davila. All great points. All of these auditors in their proposals are required to send us the additional years per the RFQ. So for example, the Singleton Clark and Company, they provided their 4 years worth of audits, and those they're local, and so they're not as big of a firm. Typically what you see in these proposals is you'll see additional expenses may occur based on additional visits, additional staff time. If there's something, for example, if we have grants that they need to review or manage or submit audits for, then they'll come back to us and say those are items that have to be reviewed. So you should see things, similar language like that in the contracts for any of those auditors. We believe all 5 proposals are fantastic. The local ones that I mentioned to you from Cedar Park, they've done the audit for Jonestown, Lakeway, Lampasas, Smithville, and Lago Vista ISD. So that was that local flavor that we didn't receive the last couple of times. But they're all 5 are qualified firms.
Josh, were you able to ask Darren Webb about Singleton?
Yes, sir. Actually, I called references on all these, and all the references were positive for all 5. Mr. Webb was very happy with these guys. They've actually used the firm for about 12 years now. So that goes back to what Councilor Davila is saying. Most of the people aren't adhering to the standard by which we're trying to adhere to and refreshing audit firms annually. And so even though you get in to an agreement with someone, we would prefer not to have a firm for longer than 3 years now moving forward.
Any other comments? All right, if there's no other comments from council, I'll open the floor to citizens. If you have any comment. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I just think I would prefer someone closer to us than someone in Houston. You know, that's my personal opinion.
Okay. All right. Mr. Smith, did you have comment? No. Okay. If there's no other comment, then I'm open to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Singleton, Clark and Company to do the audit. We could, at least for a year, and see what kind of comments they come up with that may be different from Neffendorf. We can always go back to Neffendorf if we needed to at a later date, but or pick someone else, but I'd like to give someone local a chance.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Collins seconded. And we'll go down the line. Mr. Barthlow,
Aye.
all right. Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Devlin,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins. Frank,
Turn your mic on, Frank.
Aye.
there you go. And I vote aye. We have a vote of 6-0. It passes. We will give Mr. Singleton, Clark and Company a try. All right, let's go on to item number 454. Discussion and consideration of possible action regarding fiscal year 2021 air quality program funding request. Last year, we received a request from CapCog to help support their efforts in their air quality program. They requested $1,070 that we did not approve. They are now requesting that we give them $392 for the 2021 CapCog air quality program, and have also requested that we give them the $1,070 that we did not give them last year. So their request is for $460 or $1,460 something, I think. Do you have anything else to add to that, Mr. Ray?
No, in our conversations, Mayor, with them, the comment was, we appreciate if City of Lago Vista would work with us this year. We understand you didn't participate last year. It would be great if you'd reimburse us for last year and by into this year. However, if the council would see it fit due to increased grants or funding this year to pay the $392, they feel like that would be a welcome addition to their programming. We have continued to be a part of the organization through the year and participated in their webinars and their input sessions.
All right. Any comments from the council?
So Josh, is it your recommendation that we pay the $392 or no?
Mayor, my thoughts are about the same as the council discussion last year. I'm not sure what we get out of the process. I believe one of the comments that happened during the council meeting last year was if we do not participate financially, will the efforts still continue? And I believe the answer last year was yes. My purpose in stating the fact that we've seen them carry on through the year is that they have carried on. I personally do not believe that the $392 made their budget. I do not believe it will break our budget. If it's something that is important, yes, as an active partner, then I would ask the council, if it's a priority, then to appropriate that. If you do not see that as a priority, then I think that's a clear statement of we do not want to be financially committed to the organization. $392 would be my max if the council said, yes, let's participate this year, though.
Frank, are you trying to talk?
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Your box kind of, it gets a little faint around it when somebody's trying to talk.
Well, there's,
Anyone Okay, all right. Anybody else have any other comments? Questions? All right, then I'll open this up to the citizens. Have anyone who's interested? All right. Then I am ready for action on this issue.
I don't,
Aaron, how long do I have to wait before I can just say there's no action?
There's not a specified time, Mr. Mayor. If you don't get a motion on it, then we can move on to the next item. There'll be no action on it if no one wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the $392 for the CapCog air program.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. Mr. Bartholow?
You're going to be a nay.
Nay? All right. Mr. Williams?
aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Debola?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. That's 5-1. Motion passes for the $392 for the CapCog Air Quality Program.
Mayor, we'll let them know, and then we will bring that back as part of a larger budget amendment to the council, just to make sure that it's appropriated directly, and then we'll make them aware of that funding.
All right. Next item. Discussion, consideration, possible action regarding ordinance number 20-05-21-01, an ordinance of the City Council of Lago Vista, Texas pursuant to Vernon, Texas Code and annotated Local Government Code, Chapter 102, Section 102.007B, providing for amendments to ordinances number 19-09-19-02 for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020. Amendments to said budget by department are set forth in Exhibit A attached to this ordinance. Okay, now this is the ordinance for the movement of funds from the general fund and utility fund for the new legal department. This is not an increase in cost. It's simply moving money that was already in the budget from general fund and utility fund to the legal department to pay for our new attorney. And then the second thing is the increase in appropriations for the library expansion project that was voted on at the last council meeting. There is a breakdown on the funds as an attachment here. Does anybody have any questions on this?
No.
Got it.
All right, I'll open it up to our citizen. Any questions? All right, then, unless there's further discussion, I'm ready for action.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 20-05-21-01, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, pursuant to Vernon's Texas Codes Annotated, Local Government Code, Chapter 102, section 102.007B, providing for the amendments to the ordinance number 19-09-19-02 for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020. Amendments to said budget by department are set forth below in Exhibit A attached to this ordinance. Do I need to read number 1 and 2 of that?
No.
Right.
I second it.
Second.
Who seconded?
I did,
I
David.
did.
Okay, Dave Williams second. With any other further discussion? All right, Mr. Barthlow,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Devlin,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
and I vote aye. The ordinance passes 6-0. Move on to the next item. Discussion and consideration and possible action on an interlocal agreement between the city of Lago Vista and the city of Jonestown for reciprocal municipal court assistance services. One of the things that is happening as part of our coronavirus is that there is quite a backlog in our courts. This is an agreement between Lago Vista and Jonestown to allow our clerks to go back and forth between the two cities in order to help out and assist when everything gets back in and going, because we're anticipating that there's going to be quite a backlog and quite a bit of work to do. This doesn't require any additional funding. It'll simply be their salary, but instead of coming to work here, they'll simply go over there and give them a day of assistance. And when we need them, they'll come back over here and help us. The initial period on this would be 6 months, which hopefully will be more than enough time to take care of the backlog. And now we'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
Mayor, the only thing I'll add to your comments is that this is a true mutual aid agreement. This is how it happens, so that one entity needs the assistance, then we provide this. The best thing is, a lot of times we just like to go and do that, but with this agreement, it allows a clear-cut path for an employee to work inside of that department. And so for the court system, you're going to want to see the allowance of another court employee to work in those courts. So we believe this is a good setup. Aaron has worked with Robin on this, and the two courts have worked together to come out with a system that could be mutually beneficial to both cities.
All right,
Mr. Mayor,
Aaron?
I believe that the intent of this agreement is really to assist on days when we have court, because there's a lot happening in the courtroom with the judge, the prosecutor. You really need two people in that courtroom to deal with defendants and process paperwork. And so that's when we anticipate using the reciprocal services on court days. So it wouldn't be a daily thing or even a weekly thing. It would just be on court days.
Just on court days.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Any other questions? I'll open it up to citizens. Do we have any questions? If not, I'm ready for action.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we execute an interlocal agreement between the city of Lago Vista and the city of Jonestown for reciprocal municipal court assistance services, and authorize our city manager or attorney to execute such agreement.
All right, do I have a second? All right. And we'll take a vote. Mr. Barthlow,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Devlin,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Makes it 6-0.
Who was our second on that, Mr. Mayor?
That was me.
Arch.
Thank you.
It was Arch. All right. Give me just a second. I've got to get up here to the next one. Are we to consent agenda? I thought there were a couple of other things that we were discussing, aren't there?
Well, we have this agreement.
Oh, those are, yeah, we're to the consent agenda. That's where we're at. All right, give me just a second here. I went too far. All right. Oh, I don't have the whole thing on this.
Don't we have a discussion requesting the CARES Act funds?
That's after the consent agenda.
All right,
That was put in as the next item.
all right.
So I've got to go back up here. Regular agenda.
Page 39.
Yeah, that's the golly.
Page 40 is the minutes.
If I had thought about it, I would have made a copy of this, thinking that
We got
Mr. Williams has the right idea on that if you're going to be doing this.
On the consent agenda, there's
All right,
only one item.
There you
There you
All
go.
matters listed under consent agenda are to be considered routine by the city council and will be enacted as one motion. There will not be separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. The only item on the consent agenda is approval of the April 22nd, 2020 City Council Lago Vista Independent School District joint meeting minutes.
Do we move to accept?
We need a motion.
I make a motion, we accept the consent agenda as written.
All right.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second. Dave Williams.
Mr. Williams? All right. We'll take a vote. Mr. Bartholow? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
He's shaking his head. Yeah. Okay. Dave Williams?
Aye. Aye.
All right. Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Debola?
Aye.
Mr. Rollins?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins?
Well, I'm cutting in and out again, guys. Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. All right, now next. All right, good. We got you. The next item is discussion concerning a request by 21 municipalities within the Travis County for equitable disbursal of CARES Act. $170 million, almost $171 million. But Travis County apparently was anticipating that that money was all theirs. The mayors of 21 of our communities got together because this money was supposed to be designated for municipalities and requested that the county distribute this money appropriately according to population. And the letter is included in your packet. You see that Briarcliff, Cedar Park, Jonestown, Long Vista Lakeway, Leander, Manor, Pflugerville, Point Venture, Rolling Wood, Village of San Loran, City of Sunset Valley, Village of the Hills, Village of Voltaire, City of Westlake Hills. All of these are communities that are requesting that they appropriately disperse these funds. I don't really think that this takes any action on our part. This is more just a notification to all the council members, as well as being a notification to our citizenry that we are making an effort to get our fair share of these funds. Mr. Ray, do you have any other comment on that?
That's spot on, Mayor. The challenge now is for the county, the Commissioner's Court, to actually take this letter and to say, okay, we hear you. We would love to give you some funding so that you can do what you want to do with this CARES Act funds. The initial response came back from the Commissioner's Court from their meeting on Tuesday, and they said the $197 per person is high. That's pretty much what we expected. We were on a call again on Wednesday. We don't know what the answer will be. Initially, the county had said, if you want to request funds from us, then you can submit this form, send the request, and then it'll be considered based on whatever you submit. It didn't really have any guidelines. So what the mayor's discussed twice now is the desire to have this allocation, for example, the $1.4 million for Lago Vista, to provide for our expenses, to potentially provide for an economic development fund or some other dollars that could provide local support to small businesses. So we don't have any kind of solid feedback from the Commissioner's Court or from Judge Bisco. But as soon as we get more, we'll send the email. But as you already said, Mayor, we just want everyone to know that we're working on it, and we're trying to bring some of that money specifically here to help our community.
Mr. Mayor, Josh, one question. If they thought that 197 per person was high, did they come up with a number that was more appropriate in their mind?
Mayor, they did not. You know, initially we thought that maybe they would try to Pawn Stars it and come back at $100, and then maybe the group would come back and throw out another high number, and eventually we would end up at a 150 number. But they provided zero feedback. They just said, we feel like it's a bit high. We have a lot of expenses too. So as the mayor pointed out, the city of Austin, with their $170 million allocation, they have the specific dollars afforded to them to support their businesses. And Williamson County and other surrounding counties have taken a similar approach to providing a per capita disbursement of funds. These cities are just asking Travis County to do the same.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the next item. Discussion regarding an amendment to ordinance number 18-06-21-06, section 13.1105, initiation, restrictions, and termination of drought response stages. And I believe Mr. Devila, you're up on this.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to begin this dialogue among council members so that we could discuss and maybe take action at some point to move away from stage 1 watering restriction. The thing that you see on that page that is in your packet says that the recommendation is to terminate current stage 1 and initiate normal water storage conditions. So what I wanted to point out here as we get into this discussion is that there are two things that are required for us to be able to cease the stage 1 water restrictions and go back to normal water conditions. And that is that it's the responsibility of council to take the action to make that happen. And the other is that there has to be satisfaction of the requirement that the Highland Lake reservoirs, or the Highland Lakes themselves, have a capacity of at least 900,000 acre feet of water. Well, I provided in this documentation that you have before you a chart that shows that for the entire last year, oh, by the way, the requirement is that we have to have had 900,000 acre feet of water in those two lakes for at least the past 3 months. So the chart that I provided for you, which is page 56 of the packet, shows that not only have for the entire past year, we have had the water levels at or above 1.7 million, but the projection is worst case scenario moving forward to the end of the year, we would be at or above 1.3 million. So I think that satisfies the requirement of having at least 900,000 acre feet of water in those two lakes. And so my feeling is that there are two things, and I think that Ron Smith is probably going to weigh in on this, because the idea that I have more or less mirrors something that he said a while back. And these are the 2 points that I'd like to make. One of them is that we don't really need to have the water restrictions that are in place right now. What the only difference between stage 1 and normal conditions is that hand watering with a hose-in sprayer is allowed to be done any day between certain hours, and those certain hours are between 7 p.m. to midnight, and then from midnight to 10 a.m. the following day. So hand watering is allowed to be done at those hours the entire week. There's no restriction there. And that is the difference between those two water conditions that we're talking about. I'm responding to also to complaints that I've had from residents who complained about their water bill, the water bill being excessively high. Now, I've begun to do a water rate structure and cost analysis of what is happening around the lake, and I'll have more on that as we get to budget time. When we get to talking about budgeting, I think is the appropriate time to talk about those things. So this is the beginning of that discussion to do two things. One is to remove the restriction that we have right now of stage 1 and go to normal water. And then the second one is to consider at budget time making an adjustment to our water rates. And also, I believe our water rate structure needs to be looked at as well. Okay, so that's the beginning, as far as I'm concerned, of the dialogue that needs to take place if we're going to do anything about these states. That's all I have for now.
Does anyone else have any input?
Yes, sir. Mayor, this is Frank.
Yes. Yes, Frank.
Councilman Dovell is correct about what I suggested in the past, that we eliminate the requirement that's in the ordinance now that calls for watering twice a week. If you look at section 13-1105 C and E, those provisions that call for irrigation restrictions, the Senate starts off now twice per week. That is not what is in the model Lcra that was added by council some time back. The same thing is versus water use response, which says limited to twice a week. that was added. The way what I'm suggesting simply is in the ordinance where it says irrigation restrictions, you simply add the word none and let people water when they want to water, because we've got the water, and it'll probably raise revenue. And then do the same thing with E, where it says purchase water use response measures, and just add the word none after that, and that'll ordinance. Second recommendation has to do with parentheses conditions. Parentheses says requirements for initiation. The city council shall implement da 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 da. I suggest that we change the ordinance and say city manager. The city doesn't really have a choice about whether we initiate or not, because we have signed an agreement with Lcra that we will, and they have a system set up to penalize us if we don't take action. I don't think there's any need to be automatic. It would be more efficient if you just change that to say the city council or the city manager shall implement. He also has that authority in the demand related responses. So then the ordinance would be consistent about when you initiate or who initiates. City manager does. Thank you, sir.
All right, does anyone else have any input?
So let me ask a question. We don't expect to see a drought this year? I mean, all the years that I've been here, at some period in time, there's a drought. From reading all this information that was provided, there's also several different triggers that start. I mean, all the manager would have to do is say we're under normal water conditions right now, and until we have a problem with where the lake goes down far enough that we're in a drought stage, he can then say we need to go to stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3, wherever we are. I don't understand what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, can I comment, Mayor?
Yes.
The ordinance needs to be amended to do what you suggested. That's all. The ordinance, which is Article 13.11.000, it's part of Chapter 13, needs to be amended to allow what I suggested and you agree with.
Right.
All right, anybody else?
In other words, right now, the city manager does not have the authority to say you can water anytime you want. He does not have that authority.
So do we have to withdraw or postpone this to change that language to put in the city manager and add those words none?
Well, you can't act on it. This is a discussion. You can't act on it tonight. But
Okay.
And so we could say bring the ordinance back with whatever direction you want to give the city manager about bringing an ordinance to us. Because we can't change it tonight. It'll have to be put on a future agenda to change it.
So we're always going to react to LCRA regardless, right? I mean, if we go back to normal, city manager says use water and the LCRA says we're in drought conditions, we need to go to stage 2, we would do that automatically through the city manager, correct?
Not right now.
That's my suggestion.
LCRA is the one that dictates what we're going to do, right?
Yes, the LCRA would dictate it, but right now, what would have to happen is it would have to be brought to the council and then we would have to vote on it in order to implement it or to take it away. What Frank is saying is that we need to change the language so that if LCRA comes in and says, we need to implement this now, the city manager can simply say, all right, we are now at stage 2 or whatever stage it is.
I have no
Okay.
problem with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, now,
Or vice versa. You can say we're in normal watering conditions and you can water whenever you want. And then if he comes back and says, well, you need to go to stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3, he could do that at that appropriate time.
Mayor, may I respond?
yes,
There are two things. The first one that Councilman Williams brought up is the idea that we may go into another drought situation. But the reason why I wanted everyone to see the chart that was provided on page 56 is that it shows that under different conditions, the worst case scenario would be that we would get to 1.3 million acre feet of water in those two lakes. That is not, drought conditions are when we drop below 900,000. And that's not expected to happen between now and the end of the year. This is a thing that we probably need to visit year to year because things change. I mean, we had a huge flood last year. Next year it could be a really major drought, but there's no way for us to be able to anticipate that. We're going to have to react no matter what. And that's my point. Okay, that was one of the points that Mr. Williams brought up. Secondly, as far as I'm concerned, at least from what I've read, the LCRA does not get involved in saying you can go to normal water conditions. That is something that's done community by community. They step in when there's a requirement to go to water restrictions, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever it happens to be. So those are the 2 points that need to be made.
Okay.
all right. The only thing I'm going to throw into this is that myself and staff spent an awful lot of time in putting together this water conservation plan. And at the time, the thought was that keeping the city on a stage 1 was just good policy. The research has showed that you really don't need to water your yard more than twice a week. Just throwing water away because all it does is run through your yard. All that the plants need in order to thrive and to be green is twice a week. The one thing that really concerns me is the fact that they let water through that dam every single day. 2,283 acre feet of water. I have no idea how many millions of gallons that is, but 2,283 acre feet of water goes through that dam every day. You start running that into a year, and if we don't have rain, that's a lot of water going to be draining off of the lake without any use. And every year, there's somebody else putting a straw into the lake. Now, are we conserving more water than what the other cities around the lake are? Yes, we are. I think that's a good thing. But staying on stage 1 restrictions and just watering twice a week or using a handheld hose, to me, just makes good sense.
Well, currently, yes, let me add to your comments there. I'm sorry that you broke up at the very beginning. At the very beginning of your statements, you broke up and I couldn't really understand what you were saying. But let me say this. Stage 1 requires or limits people to watering twice a week.
Yes.
The normal water conditions that we have in our our ordinance actually is still maintaining those 2 days of watering when you're talking about irrigation. But when it comes to washing your car, you should be able to do that any day. That's not the case right now. If you have a boat and you want to wash that down, you can't do that just any day. You can do it on those 2 days, and that's about it. Now, as far as the irrigation is concerned, you mentioned watering plants. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never seen an irrigation system that watered plants. The ones that I'm familiar with are simply for lawns. So boats, cars, plants, hose end sprayers are plenty fine, and I think that we should allow them to be used any day. And to the point that Frank made earlier, by allowing that to occur, we're probably going to sell more water, and we're probably going to get some revenue from that we're not getting right now. And I think as we move forward, then we can then start looking at the water rates that we're charging right now for the various categories, are they appropriate? I'm prepared to say that they're not, but I don't want to just dismiss it like that. I want to come to you with hard facts, with numbers, because I'm looking at this in a mathematical way. And when I compare what we're charging right now for water, we're way out of line with all of the other communities around the lake. Our rates are super high, and I can show you how I made those comparisons. And I think you'll agree when I show you the way that I approach this, that it's a fair way to look at it. One other thing, let me throw one more thing in.
Okay.
When you look,
go ahead.
Let me just say this one thing. When you look at our water rate structure, we have 7 different steps in there, with normal watering conditions being one of them. 7 different categories. I'm sorry, let me back up. When you look at the categories for use, we have 7 different steps in our water rate structure. Okay, nobody else does that. And the 2 studies that I've looked at so far nationally do not agree with having any more than 5. Okay, so I don't know how we got to the point of having 7 different categories, but I think we need to visit that and make some adjustments. I'm very emotional about this because I think that we're really off base.
The only thing I would say about that, Arch, is that's a totally different discussion. And that's something
Yes,
that
it
needs
is.
to be brought back as another issue on an agenda at another point. Because today I know we're talking about stage 1.
Right, I know that. I'm just, excuse me, let me just say this. I said earlier, I mentioned in the very beginning that we do need to look at that later on. I'm just saying that if we're to enact what I'm proposing, which is to allow hose end watering anytime, we're going to create more revenue, and then that should enable us to lessen the water rates that we're charging right now. That's all. I'm not saying we need to take that action now. I'm just simply saying the one thing that I'm recommending that we do is to consider getting away from stage 1 and going to normal water conditions. That's it.
Mr. Bartholow, you were trying to say something?
I feel like this is a pretty important issue to most of our citizens. The water bill, basic water bill rate is probably too high. And I know there are justifications for that along the way, but also most of these water discussions, we never really get into all the new people moving to all of the local communities and all the water that they're going to use. So I think it's something that's important enough to be discussed at an actual council meeting when we can have an actual audience again. And the more prepared we are for a good presentation at that next live meeting, the better.
All right. Anyone else? If no one else has anything, then I'm going to open this up to Mr. Smith. Ron? You're on. You're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
So I gather from Arch that essentially you want to go back to the original drought contingency plan, which is, I worked very hard to actually get away from that. But if that's your goal, is to do that, then let me point you to page 79. Let me start there. And I'd ask that you go to page 79 as well. Now, when we looked at this thing, we were going through 5 years of drought, and we were down at the bottom of that chart. And we were there for about 4 to 5 years, at least while I was on the council. This chart is the master chart by which the entire drought contingency plan is based upon. Okay, if you understand this chart, you don't have to read the text because you got the gist of it from this chart. Let me just say that one of the things that we did, and if you do want to take it back, you're going to have to make another major change to this chart, which will also change the ordinance. You see right there where you've got the combined storage greater than 900,000, right below the solid black line. There's a bunch of hatched areas across there. And then the next one down says, if the lake falls between 900,000 acre feet. Well, the lake holds 2.1 million acre feet. If you want to go back to the old DCP, which is what I hear Frank and Arch advocating for, then you're going to need to go back into this chart and insert another row above 900,000 acre feet, which is going to say falls below 1.4 million acre feet, and put the criteria on there. Because one of the things we were trying to do with Lcra is make sure that we didn't have to send code enforcement out every time the lake fluctuates. So when you go from 2.1 million acre feet down to 900,000, that's approximately 60% of the lake movement in any given year. And the rationale for doing all this was to make sure that we had a stable input flow so that we could adjust the rates around what we used. So if you want to go back, you don't see it on this chart because we took it out. But there's another row that sits in there that says falls below 1.4 million acre feet. So Arch, make a note. If you want to go back, you got to make it the way it was. You're going to insert another, for lack of a better word, code enforcement effort into the system so that you can say everything above 1.4 is basically unlimited water use, is what I'm hearing you saying, which is kind of the way it was before. Just understand that 900,000 acre feet was kind of a negotiated thing with Lcra that said, hey, we'll take the hit on the upper end when the lake is full, and we'll get it back on the lower end when the lake goes critical on us. That was the strategy. You're changing the strategy. That's fine. You just need to know the implications of changing the strategy. Now, I believe we talked about this because I remember you and I had a discussion, Arch, about a year ago. And after we had that discussion, I talked to the city manager at Marble Falls, Mike Hodges, and Dave and David over in Burnett. They did not change their DCP. They had that unlimited use up there in the normal conditions. And after one full, actually almost 2 full years of the lakes coming back up, they saw no additional water sales per household. Now, if you got growth, that's because of the growth, but they didn't see the revenue generation that you speak of. Now, you're welcome to go talk to them as well, because they didn't change their rules at all, but they'll also tell you they didn't see any revenue gain when the lakes came back up. So in other words, the changes that we made didn't hurt us, didn't really help us, and the same thing's true under the old plan. So now go back, now go to the chart that Arch talked about over on page 56. This is the LCRA look ahead forecast. And so what I'm saying is you're going to put in that 1.4 million acre feet back into that table, because you're going to put it back the way it was. I normally, when I look at this forecast line going forward, I generally take the third line from the top. That's typically where LCRA runs. You will notice you will hit 1.4 in about the end of August, first part of September timeframe. So right there, you'll start code enforcement once you go back to the original DCP. And now you're going to have people go out there and reset their irrigation systems, and they're going to constantly be changing these things every time the lake goes up and every time the lake goes down. It's going to be an absolute code enforcement nightmare. And I want you to think about that, because I've been looking at this stuff for many years. Y'all have looked at it for a few years. All I'm saying is that we looked at a lot of components in this thing. We looked at everything from the lake being full to drought. We looked at rates. We looked at enforcement. We looked at drought fees. We looked at irrigation restrictions. It's critical where you draw those lines. Now, if you want to go back to the old plan, you just need to pull the old plan back out of the system and reinstate it. But when you do that, you're going to find out that you're probably going to be actually going into certain drought stages a little sooner than you think they are, because there's another level in there that you don't see on these charts because of the current DCP. I don't really want to get into the rate structure question, because that's actually the calculation made off of what happens with the usage of the water as it passes through the meters of the intakes. But if your goal is to adjust this DCP, then pull out the old plan. You'll insert a new row at 1.4. You probably need to pass it across LCRA, and the gains that we make on the low end are going to be surrendered on the upper end, all in the namesake of trying to generate a little extra revenue, which I don't think you're really going to generate according to Marble Falls and Vernon. Now, I guess I'm going to stop right there and see if y'all have any questions.
I'd like to make a comment. Ron, when we look at the population of Lago Vista versus Marble Falls, I think that's who you're comparing us to. We probably had the same population back in 2010. I don't believe you'd find that to be the case now. I believe that we are considerably more, trying to think of the more densely populated than they are, and we continue to grow. And so we're going to always have a demand on our water system. Now, I have to go back and look at what you're talking about, because I have not addressed the idea of going back to the DCP that was in place before. I have no idea what that was. I'm just simply saying that we need to remove the restriction so that people can water using a hose end sprayer any day between those hours that were used before. That is from 7 p.m. one day to 10 a.m. the next day. That's my principal argument.
So I think you can do that by modifying the plan if that's what you're trying to do. My bigger concern are those sprinkler systems and people that want to wash their boats at 12 o'clock in the afternoon at 105 degrees. That's why you have conservation plans, is to to conserve the water, not to waste the water.
Understand that, but I would argue that if I have a boat, I'm not going to be washing it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would be doing it early in the morning or late in the evening. And that's what my intent is here. Now, let me make one other point. You're talking about the water levels. I don't have the chart in front of me. I'll have it next time, but I can tell you that the green line that you see on page 56, that line represents pretty much what was there the first day of May this year. So I think they took that number and went right across the page with it, so that we're almost at 2 million acre feet of water in the two lakes, because they're talking about combined lake levels.
Correct. And by the way, do you know why they combine them?
Because they're two reservoirs.
There is a reason. Well, they're looking at total supply, and either Buchanan or Travis can be high or low at any given time. So they use the total to make the calculation with it. It's actually a more accurate measure. And that's what makes using the lake levels a little awkward, because they got a total demand system that's slightly different than the actual lake levels based upon how it's distributed between the two lakes. And by the way, LCRA Water only owns Buchanan and Travis. All the other lakes are owned by LCRA Electric, just so you know.
That's good to know.
I just think I spent a lot of time working on this, and I didn't do it overnight. It took years to actually come up with this revised DCP. But if you want to go back, then I would just say dust off the old one and go back to it, and not try to modify this one. This had a specific intention of trying to knock out variability of the lake levels so that we had some reasonable assurance of water use.
Understand, and I understand that the fact that we have 7 steps in our structure is all about conservation. I understand that, but I have not found, in the little bit of research that I've done, I've not seen where anybody else has that many steps. That just seems absurd to me.
Yeah, I'm not especially fond of 7 steps myself. My bigger concern is if the issue is you're trying to generate more water revenue by being less restrictive, which intuitively kind of makes sense. I think the water rates have done more to restrict the water usage than the DCP has.
That may be true.
I would agree personally.
I think if you were to drop the rates, then I think the question of the twice-a-week watering restriction probably has more merit. But until you drop the rates, you're not going to really know if that's true or not.
Well,
unless there's a way to model it.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm looking at it in the inverse of what you're proposing. I'm saying, right, let's loosen our water restrictions first, and then look at what revenue is generated there, and then adjust our rates accordingly, so that we're not making that much more money, but we're also not punishing the minor users of water, because I think those are the people that are getting hammered more than the ones that are using great numbers of gallons of water.
Just remember that this is applicable to outside water use. The inside water use is what you see in your rate tables. For the household, there's an irrigation table that's separate to all of this. And let me say that those forecast charts on LCRA, where you see the 4 lines going forward, they probably have baked in water sales that are going downstream to rice farming industries down there. And because the lake is is up. They're going to make the water sales, so they're going to release it. That's why you see the lines dipping. They make one last check, I think, just before June 1st, just to make sure that they're okay. And if they're okay, they're going to release the first batch out of the lakes, and then they'll release the second batch called the ratoon crop. They'll release that on the in the July timeframe. Just so you know, when they grow rice, when they plant the rice, it grows to a certain height. Then they go in and cut it in half and harvest half of it, and then they can get a second crop off the second water release and essentially double the rice sales. And that's why there's 2 water releases that take place. So I'm saying all this stuff plays together, and when you change one piece of the puzzle, you have to kind of know the cause and effect that's going to happen for the entire system.
Well, that's something to be studied for sure.
I think you're going to find that your strategy is, without being, I don't mean to be trite about this, but I think it's overly simplistic. I think it's more involved than what you think it is. If the group really wants to go down that path, just go back to the old DCP. I wouldn't tweak with this one. I would either have this for drought and use the other one for non-drought, and I guess you could flip them back and forth, I guess. The intent was not to do that. The intent was to have a rule set out there that under the worst conditions, under the best conditions, we could survive.
All right. Now, Arch, this question.
Yes.
What action do you want staff to take, or what action do you want us to take going forward? Do you have something right now that you want to implement, or is this simply for discussion to look at and think about things down the road?
I think we need to vet this thoroughly, but my recommendation is for us to go to normal water conditions. That's my recommendation.
Okay. Well, I don't believe that we had this as an actionable.
No, it's not.
This is just simply discussion tonight. So would that would be something you will want to bring up at the next meeting? Have that on the
Yes,
agenda
sir.
as an action item? All right. Well, we
Yes.
can instruct the city manager to add that to our agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Can we make sure that when we do this analysis that we have our expenditure, the city expenditures included in what he's talking about?
Excuse me, Dave. No.
Well, you know, there's been a lot of pipes put in the ground, which is a city expenditure that is dealing with the water rates too. So we need to have all of the information at our disposal so we can make some sort of sound decision.
Dave, if I may comment on that.
Yes.
There is, as part of the budget, there is part of the debt service that needs to be dealt with, as well as the expenses that are incurred in improving your system and things of that nature. That's a whole different discussion. That's about water rate setting, and that's something that we need to look at when budget time comes around.
Mayor, may I make a comment or two?
Yes, sir.
Oh, goodness, I'm glad I got in here. Number one, for Ron, it's an interesting exercise in which we as individual council members spend a good bit of time debating with an individual member of the audience. And I had a number of points that I would have engaged Ron in a discussion, and Arch, and how many others. I think there's a problem when we engage a citizen in a debate between all of us, when I think what we might want to do is listen to his input and then have a discussion amongst ourselves. Now, substantively, Ron described what we used to have as an enforcement nightmare. That is absolutely incorrect, because I was the guy that supervised the code enforcement, which was one person and was also the building official. It's not a nightmare at all. And he's correct. You'll add another layer at the 1.4 million. That's absolutely right. If you go on, and I'm looking at it right now, the Lcra drought contingency plan, you can see that. And then finally, my goodness, guys, we're not supposed to be talking about rates tonight. I could make 27 comments to what Art's just saying, and that's just wrong. If we want to talk about rates, then put it on the agenda and not talk about it when something else is on the agenda. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Frank. And that's basically what I was saying, that needs to be brought back at another time. Anyway, all right. Anybody else have any more comments? Then I think we're to deciding what we want on the agenda for the next meeting. And we've already, Don, what's the discussion about when we can have in-person council meetings and how we could arrange that? Is that all right, Don? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Look
We
with
can
the mouse.
we can put that on the agenda for next time. And then the stage 1 restrictions, we can look at that. Anybody else have anything that we need to put on the agenda for June the 4th? Josh, do you have anything? No?
I had to find my mouse as well. I was like Don, the mouse was there and then it left. No, sir, we have a couple items we sent that I sent to Sandra. So I think we have, right now, I think we have 5 items that we have on the agenda, and then we'll check with Roy as well. So we should be moving forward.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, then I am going to call this meeting adjourned at 8:06.